From CSDC, the Charter Schools Development Center.
You have to convince people to join you and get this founding board together, and all you have is this beautiful flyer and an idea, and you somehow have to convince them to give you lots of time, free labor, and belief that it can happen.
Welcome to Boarding Pass, your ticket to effective charter school governance. I'm Catlin O'Halloran Heller, and more than 20 years ago, I got the bright idea that I was going to start a charter school. My son was in preschool, and I wanted to create a free Montessori charter school as a public education option in my small rural community. I actually said the words, I mean, really, how hard can it be? And 2 decades later, I know exactly how hard it is to build and maintain a high-quality charter school in California. So I'm going to take you down the path I went down and help you learn everything you need to know to excel as a board member in a thriving charter school. Today, I would like to welcome Malka Borrego, an experienced CEO, educator, and founder of MB Consulting. Malka is a leader in education, establishing a charter management organization in Los Angeles, dedicated to providing high-quality education and equity in her own community. Deeply committed to family, community, and educational equity for all, she's a champion for environments where students can thrive and develop as confident learners. With her leadership background and expertise in board development, she brings an impressive lens to the conversation of governance. I'm delighted to have her here today. Welcome to Boarding Pass, Malka.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
Great. Well, glad to have you. And first, I'm curious, what drew you to the work of charter schools?
So I grew up in a community called Pico Union, right outside of downtown Los Angeles. Third generation, grew up in the same home that my mother was raised in. And unfortunately, it's a community that didn't provide access to great public education. So many of my family members had to leave the community to get an education. And so when I came back after college and became a teacher, I thought I really want to be part of the solution. And so that's why I helped to found Equitas Academy.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. It sounds like you and I have sort of a similar journey. I'm fifth generation from my community and same sort of deal, looking for some options that, match the value and the worth of the students, right, in the community, which is great. So you founded a charter school, and as a school leader, what things were you considering when you were building that first board, that first charter school board?
I remember it was back in 2007, and you have to convince people to join you and get this founding board together, and all you have is this beautiful flyer and an idea, and you somehow have to convince them to give you lots of time, free labor, and belief that it can happen. And I was able to do that, and I think our first founding board is maybe 9 folks who really were the staff to help us recruit students, find the first building, really took the idea and operationalize it, really made it come to life.
And so to find that first board, did you go out in the community and recruit people you didn't know? Was it folks who volunteered? How did that sort of come together?
I had done a lot of nonprofit work. So I knew, and because I grew up in the community, I knew a lot of folks that were doing work and understood the community. So I started there, friends, family, colleagues, and I just took a ton of meetings, right? To meet people, coffees. I knew every Starbucks and every quiet coffee shop, and, just set up shop there, and really just started connecting and listening to see that if the vision I had for what I was hearing the community needed and wanted aligned to folks I was talking to on the ground. And when there was a match, that's how I found board members. So a lot of board members also were raised in the community, also saw a need for the type of a school and organization we were talking about.
Got it. No, that's great. And how did they play a role then as your school grew? So they were that founding board. And I know from having a founding board at my school, I mean, they were mowing the lawns for a while. I mean, every job was sort of. So how did as your school grew and evolved a little out of that, how did they impact that growth?
Yeah. Yeah, so they definitely were putting together the IKEA furniture and knocking on doors with me and defending the charter and getting us authorized.
Sure.
And I had this idea. I wonder how this might have landed with you, but I had this idea that it was my job to find the founding board, and then they would help us launch, and then we would hire staff, and then they would figure stuff out on their own, and I would run the school, and they'd take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And that was my first bad assumption in governance, and I learned a lot, and excited to hear what your experience was with that.
Well, I think you're right. I think, when our board was a lot of parents, some community members, some grandparents, a lot of just parents who wanted to be involved and trying to figure out what their strengths were and how they could help. And I recall one parent in particular, we started with 38 kids. So it was a tiny school in the beginning. And she had a special needs student. And so she was sort of our de facto special ed person until we could actually get some services purchased for those. It's just in terms of setting up what do we need? What does that look like? How do we do this? How do we, and a lot of us were not educators. And so, yeah, I mean, it's pretty impressive, the talents that we were able to extract from people as they joined the board. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And so you started your own, based on your experience, you started your own consulting business, and you emphasized the importance of board development for charter schools nationwide. And I'm wondering why that's a passion for you and why you put so much emphasis on boards.
Mm-hmm. So my first assumption that the board's supposed to lead themselves was, quickly, that bubble popped very quickly. Right. And I learned I needed to be a partner. Yes. And I needed to move in partnership with the board, move from founding to governing. I led my CMO for 15 years. And in that time, I really got to understand what true partnership looked like between myself as the CEO, and particularly because we grew from one school, and we started with, I think, 38 kids, under 40 kids, similar to you.
Yeah, same experience.
And we grew to 2,000. So when I left in 2022, my relationship with the board and the support that I received from our group was I felt really held and supported. And I really felt that the organization was in the right hands. And because of that, I thought, I really want to take this learning and this relationship that I've had and this growth I've had with this group of people and really open that up for others so that other CEOs can feel that kind of support. Because I felt really alone for quite some time till I learned how to partner, and that the board also showed up in a way that partnered with me. And so it just felt like, this is where I want to spend more time so that, if you're running charters, you don't feel as alone, and you can really tap into these beautiful people that are giving up their time to make sure that the organization continues.
Yeah, that's excellent. Just when you talk about, you feeling held by the board. So I think one of the roles we don't talk about that the boards do is really support their lead administrator or their executive director in a way that helps them to grow in that role too. And we do talk about things like evaluations, which are super important, but also I think just understanding the roles of governance versus management. What's your job? What's my job? Am I overstepping? How can I support you? What resources do you need? I mean, all sorts of things, especially in those really early days of schools and school growth and all of that. And so that you had that developing board. And then tell me a little bit about the stages of boards beyond that. So you had that group of folks that you knew from your nonprofit work, and they were really rolling up their sleeves and getting in there. And then the growth started. And how did that happen? And what did the boards, how did they transform?
Well, we opened in 2009, and California and the rest of the United States was in a fiscal crisis. And so, we weren't getting our checks from, the California Department of Education on time. And so our board had to really roll up their sleeves in a much more direct way to even make sure that we would exist past, year one and year two.
Right.
So it felt like we stayed in founding a little bit longer than typical because it was such a difficult opening. But we also learned a lot. We also learned to be very fiscally conservative when, you have to figure things out and you have to work together. So transitioning from founding to governing, I don't think I understood, you think about that word governance versus management, and that was my training. And I think it took me quite some time to really understand it doesn't have to be a versus, it can be a partnership.
Yes,
right.
that's a really good point. Yeah, yeah.
So I spent a lot of time maybe in the versus, kind of like, are you in my lane? Am I in your lane? When really after many, many years, I got to a place of like, how do we partner and set each other up for success? And I think it's when I started to feel that the board was offering me support. They were offering me coaching. They were offering me that, we had the right mix of board members where their expertise could be utilized in ways that, really supported not just me, but the organization in a really dynamic way. But, there was some time between founding and management where, I did, are you above the line, below the line, or are you asking these, too many questions? When I exited, I was really like, tell me why you're interested in that. What don't I understand? So my posture and my experience changed. And I think that also helped to create a stronger relationship with the board as well.
That's a really sort of an enlightening point, honestly, as you're saying that, because a lot of times I do talk about it versus, and I don't necessarily mean as a, sort of against each other, which is, if you think about it as a team, right? You versus, right? It's one team playing another team. That's, and I think I think about it more in the ways that you do. We all have jobs at the school and to make the school run. And how can we do the best in our roles to support the other people who are doing those jobs? It starts by knowing what your role is, right? I mean, what is it? I mean, am I supposed to set the bell schedule as a board member? Is that what my job is? No. But how do I know that unless someone explains that to me if I'm new on board? And so but I really like your challenging the term versus, because I think I haven't thought about it in that sort of adversarial way, more in that sort of a different context, really. So that's great. And so how do you understand, you talked about developing and boards, and how do you understand as a school leader, as someone who, works with boards, how do you understand what stage your board is in and maybe how to move them to the next stage where it's not an adversarial or it's even not a growth beginning? How do you help move them? And how does that affect the role of the board?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head about it. Really starts with clarity of roles. And as the school grows, whether they're in growth, whether it's growth in 10, number of years you're open, roles do shift, right? And so it's a continual process. And so particularly for organizations like my own that is growing, I used to make a joke that I'm always 6 months behind knowing my job because my job shifted so much. And so I always felt like I was learning a new job. Well, that would mean that the board is also, shifting in their roles. And so that's challenging. That took many, many more years than I want to even confess to. That we didn't get it right. I didn't get it right for a very long time. Yeah. And it's because there wasn't something to get right and stay stagnant. There's a wide space between, founding and governing. And I think, some governing boards can even go back into some founding stages. And what we were really striving for is not just to be governing, but to be sustaining, right? So that it's not just governing where we know each other's roles, but how do we create systems so that, after 15 years, I transitioned out, that I wasn't the only one who knew how to do things, that there was systems around sustainable practices that were documented and cross-trained and, multiple people know about. So, that was, I think, the journey that we that we were on as in an organization, and that I was on as a leader. And once you feel like you got that clarity, you want to just stay there, and it's just not possible. You have to keep revisiting that.
Right. Yeah, that growth and that, coming into the experience as a learner, right? And saying like, I'm already 6 months behind. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out, right? We're going to figure it out together. The board and the school leader are going to figure this out together. And so we talked a little bit about this a minute ago, but the management versus governance, the roles and responsibilities. So tell me what you think as a school leader, some of the most important responsibilities of board members are.
Well, it seems so simple. But I think just so important is like, what are in the bylaws? What did we say we were going to do? And
Sure.
do we know that?
Yeah.
And then how are we holding ourselves accountable or adjusting? The board can change bylaws, but really about like, what did we set? What did we say we were going to accomplish? And how are we living that through some sort of mechanism, conversation, or structure? I think is important. That has to be revisited. What does it look like for the board to be successful? Sometimes I felt like we focused a lot on what it looked like for the school and the organization to be successful, because of course, right, that's why we're doing this. But it wasn't until we shifted into say like, well, what's the board's role in this? And what does success look like explicitly for them, where I think that partnership really showed up. Because now it feels a little more balanced.
Sure. And so did you actually do some proactive like board self-assessment, some board audit sort of things to get your board to understand where they felt like they were lacking information and those sorts of things? Did you do that with your school?
Yes. So one practice that we held very steady and constant throughout our tenure, from founding to governing, which, we started to dive into sustaining, is we had a retreat. We had evaluations of individual board members and the board as a whole. And then we had the board come together to set goals and then, understand, where they were and where they might want to upgrade their practices. And then how I would, what my role was in that. And so just to be very explicit with those pieces.
I think that's valuable, though. I think I'm a charter school board member now, and I think you can fall into a little bit of a malaise around feeling like, I got this. I show up once a month for a meeting. It's, and you forget how pivotal you and the board are to the functioning of this school. And so if you're not doing a good job as a board, working together and understanding the issues and asking the questions and all of that, then I feel like I just feel like you're not doing the best leading you can do. And that's ultimately what your role is, to being a school leader on a board.
I think it took me quite some time to start to think about the board as a team with a culture. And, I definitely thought that about my senior executive team. And, I thought a lot about supporting them there. But when I shifted to understanding that the board needed its own culture and that, that's a living and a breathing thing that we should name and support, that also helped me show up as a stronger partner as well.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Yeah, I like that. I haven't really thought about it in that way before, but you're exactly right. Yeah. And I know you do a lot of work with school leaders and recruiting school leaders who are Latino, who are people of color. And part of that is because I've heard you say that less than 5% of charter leaders are Latino. So what can we do to encourage diversity of voices on our boards? I mean, we certainly have a lot of kids, who come from diverse backgrounds. How can we get leaders in our schools to be of diverse backgrounds as well?
Ooh, I love this question. In 2021, I was feeling very alone as a Latina leader, and I worked with a handful of other leaders across the country who also were the only Latino or Latina leader in their state. And we said, let's do something about it. And we started another nonprofit, became a founding board member. Name of our nonprofit is Latino Educators Advancing Leadership. And when we opened our nonprofit in 2021, the statistics were 3% of current senior leaders are Latino across the state. And we know that that's not representative of the students that we serve. And we just feel like there should be representation. And when we look at, well, what's the pipeline? At the top, it's 3%. And so the folks making the decision for Latino families, they're just not represented. When we look at teachers and principals, there's only 8%. So there's not even a pipeline.
Right.
And so we wanted to do something about it. And so that's where Leal started. And I work to support through programming and community building at a national level. How do we call for an increase in that number to match what our K-12 demographics are?
Yeah. That's great work that you're doing, and you're still that organization is still going on and thriving and doing its good work and all of that. That's great.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We just started our inaugural programming called El Camino meaning the journey, where we bring caminantes, fellows, who are aspiring Latino leaders across the country in charter schools, and we support them through. And we kick that off in Denver in October, and we'll start our second cohort in the summer of 2025. So really exciting work.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're doing that work. We absolutely, I mean, when I just look at the boards that I work with, I don't see the diversity that mirrors the students that they're, working for. And I think that's important to have those folks in the roles where kids can see them and say, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to be a school leader also. That's another important piece of it. So that's great work. And one of the things I know that folks get hesitant about on joining charter school boards, and so something I want to ask your advice on is, folks say, well, I don't have the background in charter schools. It's kind of overwhelming. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. What's student assessment data? How am I, So what advice would you give to people who don't have a background, who are just sort of well-meaning, really want to support the mission of the school? How do they start that journey? And how do they maybe find their footing along the way?
This is such a great question, because if you talk to charter operators, they're always saying, how do I find great board members? And then we have board members who are saying, how do I get connected? How do I bring my skill set or my experience? And I still think we're not very organized in the way we do board member recruitment. So it's really about relationship and word of mouth. And so if you are somebody that's interested in supporting charter schools, looking for a leader, and just asking, how will I get connected to a board? There might be an opening on that charter leaders board, or I know that they know a friend who needs a board member.
Wow.
I've got 10 folks I can call right now that I know need board members.
Yes.
And you're looking for a leader that's going to listen to what your expertise is, and there's a match, right? It is a job. And so you want to make sure that the time and the expertise you have is a match to what the school and the board and that group needs. And when there is a match, you've got this great partnership that can really flourish and really support schools to fulfill their mission, which is really fantastic.
And the people who are maybe reluctant to come forward, or the people that are maybe just parent members of the community, or they're on another service organization, and they're reluctant to come forward because they don't maybe understand the commitment or the job. Do you have board job descriptions? Do you just speak to people about the things that are involved? Because I don't think no one's born knowing what a charter school board member is supposed to do. And so I'm curious about how you help to recruit people who want to support the mission of the school, and maybe you see them as a leader before they see themselves as a leader.
Yeah, it's a really good point. When I personally was doing board recruitment with my board for the organization that I led, I would just spend time very much like the story I told about the founding time, where we're just having coffee. When I was a school leader, we would do a school tour. We would just get to know each other. Mm-hmm. Is there a match in how we think about schooling and the work of the community? I really believe communities that schools belong to the community they're in, and that the communities really bring life to the school. So, I think there has to be a match in what the board member is looking to do, and what the organization and the school is providing. But yeah, asking for a school tour, sitting in on a board meeting just to get a sense of is this something, interesting? I know on my board, our board members took a lot of responsibility for educating their peer board members on their expertise. So our treasurer led a conversation with our non-finance board members so that they felt equipped to review finances. Our academic committee spent a lot of time teaching all the acronyms that we use, because we almost speak another language in education. Looking for a board, if you're looking to be a learner, looking for a board that sets that has those structures or that orientation towards supporting your board membership, I think makes it a really good match.
And I love your examples of mentoring. So being, having mentors on the board, whether it's your finance guy talking about to the people who are not finance people, or and just saying, here, I want to share with you and then a time to ask questions because you're kind of in a safe space. It's a fellow board member. Hopefully, like you said, you've built that culture around your board where they feel comfortable talking to each other. And maybe you're doing that in a board workshop or at a retreat or something where there's the ability for folks to interact in a more casual kind of way. And I was going to add to when I was thinking when you were talking about I had an experience of meeting a woman who was in my community, and this was when we needed someone to run for the traditional district board. And I approached her, and I saw her as a leader, right? So I approached her and I said, "Hey, have you ever considered running?" And she said, "Oh, I don't have the experience. I mean, this isn't something I could possibly do." But I knew who she was and what she did, and so I listed for her experience, and I said, "Well, you're president of the PTO. You brought an art program, single-handedly found the funding and brought an art program to the middle school, right? You have 4 kids in different public schools in our community right now. You are a board member. I mean, you have all of the tools, everything, and you balance a household budget, right? You understand, pluses and minuses and what you can spend and what you can't spend." And I think for those of us who are trying to recruit, and like you said, everybody's trying to recruit, I think it's important to remember also that you may see things in other people that they just aren't seeing or acknowledging in themselves, and the ability to not only convince them, but then to grow that and say, "Let me give you the support, and let me give you the mentoring, and let me give you the experience," and the partnership with the school leader is really important in developing boards.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was a good experience. So as we kind of wrap up here today, and I'm thinking about as you're looking back at founding a charter school and building a board, what are some of the things that you wish you knew then that you think you could share with our podcast listeners today?
I mean, I've said it a few times. The more you put into your board as a school leader, the more you will get back. And it's part of our job as school operators to the success of your board is by how much time and commitment and love you're putting into those relationships. Really knowing your board members and why they've committed and what are their interests only helps to increase your relationship with them, but also helps you to understand who they are and why they're giving service to you as the leader and to your organization. So just a real relational approach. I think it took me quite some time to learn. And, I was always in community with my board members, but I don't think I took the perspective of why are they doing this and how can I partner with them and how can this be a two-way relationship? So I wish I started that a bit earlier in my career, because I really feel like that's the part of my career at the end. As I transitioned out of being an operator, that was pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it sounds like you're furthering all of that. You're taking that with you now and furthering that in terms of teaching people about developing boards and growing boards. And yeah, that's fantastic. That's great. Thank you for that advice. This has been Boarding Pass from CSDC, the Charter Schools Development Center. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And share this podcast with your charter school board member friends. And don't worry if you didn't get it all, we took notes for you. View today's show notes and take a peek at the additional resources we've created for you. Just go to chartercenter.org/boardingpass. Thanks as always to Greg Hall, Mike Watson, Melissa Cabral, and today's guest, Malka Borrego. We'll see you next time on Boarding Pass.
Now that you've got your boarding pass to effective charter school governance, why not upgrade to first class? By becoming a member of the Charter Schools Development Center, you'll gain year-round access to expert guidance, cutting-edge resources, and a network of experienced charter advisors. CSDC membership is your fast track to excellence in charter school governance, offering personalized support and professional development opportunities that will help you and your school soar to new heights. Go to chartercenter.org/membership to learn more.